We're going to talk about the damage that is done. We're going to talk about what some of the things that might be coming down the pipeline or are coming down the pipeline. And we're also going to talk about what you can do about it. Okay? That's maybe one of the more important things to stick around for, okay? Because there are things we can do. We are not without agency in this situation, and there are actions you can take to better your life, the lives of your friends and family, etc. Okay? The lives of the people in your community. It's important to understand that those possibilities exist and that you are not trapped. We'll be going over what I have found particularly useful as we go through this political moment. And I think that by the end of this, you aren't going to be feeling good, but I think maybe you might feel somewhat prepared. What happened today? Well, the House of Representatives passed without changes the Senate's budget bill, which means that that budget bill is now going to go to the desk of the President of the United States, who is going to sign it into law. Okay? Now, this budget bill is maybe one of the worst pieces of legislation to pass in our lifetimes. You know, it is absolutely destructive. It is going to do, among many, many other acts of suffering, kick tens of millions of people off of Medicaid, likely many, many more people off of Medicare. It is going to screw over state level marketplaces for healthcare. In some cases, people might be paying 3 to 4 times their premiums. It is, and that's just related to the healthcare. Okay. How Republicans have tried to sell this is that essentially they're saying, well, you see, it's going to balance the budget because it's going to make the economy grow by trillions of dollars. Except that the reality of this bill is that it is going to balloon our deficit by $4 to $6 trillion, somewhere in that ballpark. It's really bad. It also adds a lot of funding for ICE. To give you an idea of how much a lot of funding is, their current budget is about $8 billion. With the funding in this bill, its funding is going to be over $150 billion. I've seen different estimates of how much it's ballooning the budget for immigration enforcement, and that includes detention. So a large chunk of that money is going to be for facilities or concentration camps across the United States. And another large chunk of it is going to be outfitting and hiring citizen soldiers as an occupying military for America. So in total, we're looking at an explosion of ICE funding, with the goal of being able to do what they did to LA to every major city in America. And if you take the budget being supplied to the entirety of immigration enforcement, it is larger than the entire military budget of Russia. To just to give you a perspective of how much money they are putting into like ICE and immigration enforcement, they are giving it a larger budget than the entire military of one of the world's superpowers. Okay? It is Indivisible said it will make ICE the third largest military force in the world. It's not exactly ICE, but our entire immigration enforcement apparatus, which includes ICE, includes like Customs and Border Patrol, etc. Yes. Essentially, yes. It would make it the third largest military force in the world. So when we talk about it being like the Gestapo or an occupying military force, that is what this bill has just created. Okay? And what is going to be the case is that you are going to see more and more in relatively short order ICE offices embedded with local police departments, what you are going to see is a lot of other things as well. The way the funding is laid out, that is a little misleading. It's not a little misleading. We're talking about the entire immigration enforcement apparatus. I got my information from one of the leading lawyers in the immigration rights movement in America. The entire apparatus is getting around $150 billion, and yeah, that's bad. That's so basically brown shirts. No, brown shirts are unofficial members of the government. This is again much more directly relatable to like a Gestapo-like agency of unknown masked assailants who will kidnap people off the streets. Okay. And I'm trying to describe this in a way that doesn't sound hyperbolic because but like this is how bad it is. What this bill does is so unspeakably beyond the pale that it sounds like I'm being hysterical, but that's what the bill does. They made it they made it that way. Why the fuck was this passed? Well, that is an interesting question. Largely, it seems that there was a lot of political pressure being applied by Donald Trump and his goons, and I want to I want to say there was a lot of pressure, but like some of the stories that are coming out are just very weird, and I don't know how much of it is pressure and how much of it like our politicians are just brain broken or like have genuinely drunk the Kool-Aid. I am unsure, right? But some of the holdouts, the fiscal hawks that have for decades, my entire life, have talked about how are we going to pay for it? Whenever anything good comes to the table, whenever anything that might help the working class of America, the fiscal hawks have been there to ask, but what about the national debt? What about the deficit? And this time, apparently, all that was required was Donald Trump showing up and offering them signed merchandise. And I'm not even kidding. That came out in reporting late last night. It's nuts. It is truly nuts. Some of the, and I don't know, like I don't know if that is the whole of it. Maybe like part of it is, Donald Trump visited these people and like kind of like in a threatening kind of like mafioso kind of way, like, hey, you better play ball, otherwise we're coming after you. But like either way, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, they were won over by the lightest amount of pressure. And this is maybe one of the most reviled pieces of legislation in modern American history. Like the people who are aware of this bill, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, they fucking despise it. That's kind of where we're at. All right. A lot of this bill is truly awful. We're gonna take a look at what's in it in just a moment here, but it's also maybe important to note that as soon as this bill passed, Donald Trump took a moment to give a little bit of a speech, and I'm going to play you about 15 seconds of it here, because it really does feel insane to me that the entire liberal establishment and mainstream media apparatus and like have come together again to paint someone like Zoran Mamdani as an anti-Semite. Whereas Donald Trump like regularly goes out there and like talks about Jewish people in deranged, derogatory manner, and like no one says anything about it. No one says anything about it. But here he is taking a victory lap on getting this piece of legislation to his desk.
But if you love them or if you love somebody that you're leaving it to, think of that. No death tax, no estate tax, no going to the banks and borrowing from, in some cases, a fine banker, and in some cases, Shylocks and bad people. But they...
Now, you might have noticed an interesting word that he used at the end of that clip. The word Shylock. One thing to know about Shylock is that is one of the most famous Shakespeare characters. The main antagonist of a play called The Merchant of Venice. The titular merchant who demands as payment a pound of flesh, while again playing into some of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes in Europe. And I need to really emphasize to you guys that that is maybe one of the most anti-Semitic things you can say. You know, it's, hey, you know, you, in one case you might get like a normal banker, and in the other case you might get like a Jewish banker. He's JQ posting. I mean, he's not necessarily JQ posting, but like he's basically JQ posting. I don't think it's at all too uncharitable to him to be like, yeah, that's JQ posting. Like this is like a beyond the pale. This is like his, like the verbal version of a Nazi salute. Antonio's the merchant, Shylock's the moneylender. You understand what I mean. Come on. What is JQ posting? Jewish question posting. It's what Nazis do in online forums. It's their version. It's, you know, when you hear someone saying they're just asking questions, the question that is being referred to is the Jewish question. If he's not JQ posting, he's at least enabling JQ posting. Yeah, he's basically talking about how Jewish people are bankers and are going to screw you over. It's not even dog whistling. It's just straight up whistling. Exactly. You know, this is the KKK showing up without their hoods to burn a cross. You know, so it is. It's very interesting that the second he got his one and only piece of legislation through Congress, that he immediately started doing anti-Semitic slurs. And that is very worrisome. On the other end of the spectrum, what have the Democrats been doing? They've been patting themselves on the back. They've just been jerking themselves off all day. And it's maybe one of the most infuriating things I've ever seen in my life. Hakeem Jeffries is the leader America deserves. The reason they're posting this, by the way, is that Hakeem Jeffries gave a 7-hour-long talk in Congress. And, like, is that impressive? I mean, maybe a little, but like Cory Booker did like the longest speech in American history in Congress. 9-hour, right? But also, like, I do 9-hour streams where I'm talking. Okay, like I don't know, like is he the next leader of the Democratic Party? God, I hope not. Just like, it's so weak, so weak. I don't know how to properly put this in context, right? But there is a very specific feeling that is inspired within me with the twin pieces of knowledge of Hakeem Jeffries being like applauded by the entire Democratic establishment for, you know, giving a lengthy speech on the floors of Congress. And like the big concession that Chuck Schumer is patting himself on the back for is changing the official name of the bill, so it's no longer officially the big beautiful bill, something else. But like, Republicans don't care. They still call it that. They still call it the big beautiful bill. Chuck Schumer was on social media just like 2 days ago being like, look at that, we did it, everyone, we changed the name. And it's just infuriating. It's infuriating in a way that there are no words for. What Chuck Schumer did, and I want you all to understand this. What Chuck Schumer did is he took the one chance Democrats could have had to stop this. The one time in the entire legislative session that Democrats would be able to actually extract concessions, actually weaken the damage of this bill, would actually be able to use any kind of negotiating power. And he gave it all away so that he and a few other people in Congress had the ability to introduce doomed amendments to the budget bill. And like, the ones that did manage to get through were meaningless. He literally bargained away the ability to stop this budget bill for the opportunity to be able to change the fucking name. Tens of millions of people are going to lose their health care, but I guess at least Chuck Schumer has been able to change the name of a piece of legislation. It is infuriating. Can we also take a moment to turn some ire on Lisa Murkowski? We already did that the other day, but yeah, fuck Lisa Murkowski too. So many of these people who voted on this piece of legislation, to them, it's nothing. It's just a game. Your lives are just pawn pieces that they are perfectly willing to sacrifice. It is contempt for each and every one of us that fuels the political leadership on both sides. And like the New York Times is no better. Well, look at this. In Iowa, Trump begins task of selling his bill to the American people. And it's like, shouldn't you have done that before the legislation passed? Fuck you. He will also have to sell it to a skeptical public as Democrats focus on all the ways it helps the wealthy. And like do you understand how insane this framing is from the New York Times? Do you guys get it? The framing here isn't Democrats focus on how the bill is going to absolutely annihilate tens of thousands of lives. The framing here isn't about how it's going to meaningfully make poorer vast swaths of the American public. And on the one hand, the New York Times is complicit with this. And on the other hand, Democratic establishment politicians are complicit with this. Every single one of these Republican ghouls should be reviled for the rest of time. When they pass away, they need to be buried in like those like cursed sarcophagi. Like we need to remake some of those and put them in the ground. That way, like archaeologists millions of years from now can be like, oh yeah, this guy sucked.
Beyond satire. Just received this absurd propaganda email from the nonpartisan Social Security admin. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Poverty is wealth.
Yeah, every single aspect of this administration is just dedicated to bamboozling you. You can no longer trust a single thing that the government says. I mean, you never really could, but like you could trust some basic factual information. You could trust that like the Social Security Administration wasn't going to be sending you propaganda emails. Neoliberalism has predictably surrendered America to fascism. Absolutely. That is it, 100%. Neoliberalism has always been the poisoned pill that was meant to destroy America. Fucking traitorous. Wait, they sent an email that said what? The Social Security Administration sent an email patting the US government on the back for passing the tax bill. Now I want to play this. This is from the other day. You all remember the alligator concentration camp that the Trump administration is peddling around on its latest horrific PR campaign. DJ, you got the email as well. Fuck the timeline. Absolutely, it is overwhelming. But the other day, when Donald Trump was on camera at Alligator Auschwitz, he had this to say.
So we have a lot of cases where ICE will go into a farm, and these are guys working there for 10, 15 years, no problem. The farmers know them. We're going to put it's called farmer responsibility or owner responsibility, where they're going to be largely responsible for these people. And they know these people. They've worked on the farms for 15 years, and all of a sudden they've... So I have a great, Ron does, Christie does, we have a great feeling for the farmer and for others in the same position. And we're going to give them responsibility for people. And we're going to have a system of signing them up so they don't have to go. They can be here legally. They can, so...
Yeah, so I don't know if you understood all that, but basically he's laying out a system for actually bringing back slavery. Not like... like prison slavery, which of course they're going to expand with this detention camp system that they are building, but also traditional plantation slavery. They are bringing that back, okay? Because whether you grasp onto the fact that he literally called it owner responsibility over these human beings, or you understand that whatever you call that relationship, you now have given a boss on a farm or plantation like the power to decide whether or not an undocumented immigrant is able to leave the country or is able to continue living in this country with their family, or is forced to leave, or is forced to disappear in one of these detention camps, one of these concentration camps. And one might say, okay, but like, how are they going to implement that? And the answer is they just got an amount of money injected into this entire immigration enforcement apparatus that is equivalent to like the military budget of Russia. You know, they are going to have the money to be able to do this. If you are listening to me talk about this and you are feeling angry and sad and like feeling your heart break Let this moment radicalize you. Let this moment lead you to a better way of engaging with this world, because the way we have up till now been engaging with it has not been working. We need to work together to build a system that will actively oppose and stop these men from being in power. The old system led directly to this. The neoliberalism of the, since Reagan, really, but especially of the 90s, the aughts, and the 10s, that neoliberalism brought us here. Joe Biden was the chance here to restore normalcy. That was his mandate, right? His attempt to restore normalcy failed because it was rooted in neoliberal ideology. And that was always going to backslide into fascism. We need something better. We need something different. We need something that actually prioritizes working class people. And on top of that, and I need to really stress this to every single one of you, the solution to this is not in any one of us. It is in us collectively. It is in us all together, working together to throw off these chains. We must build something better out of necessity. Now, I will say, there are some Democrats willing and able to stand up and do something right. And one of the representatives I've been paying attention to for a while now is Representative Anna Eskamani, who represents a district in Florida. And luckily, I do have to say she's doing something right here, which is we are on our way to the Everglades Immigration Detention Center, built by your tax dollars and without any transparency. As state lawmakers, we have both the right and the responsibility to conduct oversight, and we will be demanding full access. Sorry, she's a representative in Florida. But this type of oversight is going to be necessary to make sure torture isn't being implemented, to make sure that people aren't just being massacred inside of these camps. I was watching the Majority Report earlier today, and they had on Heather Digby of Salon, and she was talking about the need to call these what they are, concentration camps. And they are not yet death camps, but we need to be pretty careful with our language as we go forward. The MAGA conservatives know this, the Republican movement wants this. This isn't an aberration. This isn't a deviation from what conservatives have traditionally been. This is what Republican politicians have been the entire time. This is their end goal. This is their ultimate wet dream. I present to you this interaction.
Let's secure the border. Let's make sure that ICE is funded. So you look at Nashville, which has been in the news because of the deportations, because of the woke Nashville mayor literally interfering with ICE. Now ICE is going to have the personnel and the resources to come into cities like Nashville, like Chicago, like LA, and quite frankly, deport people in New York. And quite frankly, not to shift topics, but if Zoran fudged on his immigration forms, we may very well be deporting him. Time will tell.
Yeah, well, we want to get there, Congressman.
Just a fun fact about this congressperson here. He has... oh, God, he's not one to talk. He's not one to talk about, lying on any kind of form.
We feel awful because American individualism demands that you fix the world by yourself, and it's your fault when it fails. It's a lie to keep us down.
I mean, it is one of the reasons, yeah. But that was Representative Andy Ogles, who, by all accounts, has lied about what he majored in college. He faked his graduate degrees. He also lied about his past careers. So, he's advocating for someone to be seized and deported when he himself has built up an entire life of lies. Again, I know that at this point, hypocrisy will not... pointing out hypocrisy doesn't meaningfully move the needle here, but, I guess something to be aware of, that, really their vile duplicity knows no bounds. It's really, really awful. But yeah, that oversight is going to be more and more necessary as the place that they have now literally called Alligator Alcatraz is now seeing its first, detainees. This place, by the way, built in a week. It's literally just tents and cages. Literally just tents and cages. Now, let's just take a look. We'll be taking a look at the New York Times, for all its faults, did a decent breakdown of where the costs are going for this budget bill. It's awful, you know? As you can see, the biggest cost over the next 10 years is just extending these tax cuts. It's like comically large increase in tax cut expenditure. All so that they can make the richest people in the world a little bit richer while cutting Medicaid, the program that keeps people alive in this country, cutting green energy investment and environmental efforts, things that aim to make the planet livable, student loans, food benefits, healthcare, natural resources, all of that are being cut, okay? All of that is being cut. It's really awful. There are some small spots of good, like the child tax credit increased to $2,200 in 2026. But note, one of the things about this is that it will now require that you file a social security number in order to get this tax credit. So again, anyone who would otherwise be filing taxes, maybe without a social security number, will no longer be able to file taxes, or at least if they do file taxes, they will be unable to get that tax credit, which is again primarily to help children. But the overwhelming majority of this is awful. It's just bad. Also, there are going to be a handful of cuts that only last through Donald Trump's tax term. Or not tax term, but his term. So understand that part of what is going to happen with this bill is that in the immediate sense, there are going to be changes, but then there are going to be changes that roll out. There are going to be changes that roll out immediately. There are going to be changes that roll out right after the 2026 midterms. And that's when the really heinous stuff will start hitting. And then there are going to be provisions that sunset after Donald Trump is no longer in office. And what's going to happen then, and this is one of the reasons why we all need to get ready to run and fight the Democratic Party, is that without a significant movement calling for the end to ICE, the abolishment of DHS, without a movement with those clear demands and those clear pressures being placed upon Democratic members of Congress, they're going to continue to fund ICE at these levels. Because what happens at the end of 2020, I think at the end of 2029 or at the beginning of 2029, is that the ICE funding expires. The immigration enforcement funding expires. And so what a large amount of this immigration enforcement funding is supposed to do is build infrastructure that will then demand more funding, okay? And we need to make sure we have a political movement capable of letting Democratic establishment folks know in no uncertain terms that they cannot allow these facilities to stay open. They cannot allow ICE agents to this degree to be embedded in our society. We need to have unambiguously a demand to undo the cuts to Medicaid, and hell, even let's get a single payer. Let's get Medicare for all. That's what we're going to need by the end of this. We're going to need a coherent political movement, not just to elect someone who is bare minimum not Donald Trump. We are going to need a political movement capable of, getting things better, undoing the police state, undoing the damage of ICE, but also getting us better than what we have now. Okay, we're going to need healthcare. We're going to need housing. We are going to need the things that every other country on earth views as a fundamental human right. Understand that what we are doing here and the policies we propose and demand, they matter. It has to be better because what we had before is exactly how we got here. Exactly, Ember Brains. Exactly. What this budget bill has shown is that all of the questions about how are you going to pay for it when it came to Medicaid were bullshit. All of the questions about how are you going to pay for it when it comes to housing, they're bullshit. All of the questions about how you're going to pay for it when it comes to feeding the hungry, bullshit. They were able to cut millions, tens of millions of people off of their health care to give a gigantic tax break that is unaffordable and unsustainable to the wealthiest people on the planet who did not need the extra money. None of the arguments about how are we going to pay for it, they're all bullshit. Never, ever let yourself or someone you love fall for that shit again. So we need not just a movement capable of demanding the destruction of this police state apparatus. We also need a movement capable of demanding better than what we had before. We will destroy these Gestapo agencies being propped up across America, and we will build something better on the ashes. All right, that is kind of our mission right now. That is the goal. But understand that as they cut Medicaid, as they beef up the ICE budget for domestic policing, understand a very, very chilling fact. And this was pointed out by boltsmag.org. Saw this story being surfaced again. How cuts to Medicaid hurt public safety. And wouldn't you know it, if you read this article, I'll link it in chat. But if you go over this, what has been found by researchers is that, hey, when you cut Medicaid, it makes people more desperate and they will do what they have to do to survive, which in turn increases crime. And when you have a police state, what do you do about the increased crime? You put them into prison and put them to work. It is a terrifying and horrible machine. And of course, I do want to warn all of you, over the next several days, there are going to be Republican politicians, high-fiving, partying, being real fucking smug about it. Here's Derek Van Orden in the House responding, yes, to a Twitter user saying 17 million people just lost healthcare, 18 million kids just lost school meals, 3 million Americans just lost food assistance, and he delights in it. These people are evil. There's not really any other way of understanding someone who would delight in starving 18 million kids. There's not really any other way to respond to people who would vote in favor of a bill that would kick 17 million people off of their health care and deny 3 million American families food to eat, let alone 18 million children food. It is, it's quite bad. Understand this is going to hurt countless people. Conservative estimates say about 50,000 people a year just from not having health insurance are going to be dying as a result of this bill. So what can we do? Well, one thing that I can tell you guys that I have found very useful is the What's the Plan weekly discussions being put out by Indivisible. Indivisible is the organization that's been organizing these No Kings protests, has been organizing the previous smaller protests, and is currently in the process of organizing the upcoming July 17th protest. We're going to take a look at their discussion was posted today because I found it particularly helpful and lit a little bit of hope in my belly. And yes, we'll be talking more about what we can do, okay? We're going to go through this, and it's going to be painful, but one of the things that I like about Ezra and Leah, who have been excellent leaders in this org, one thing I like about them is that they do not shy away from actually talking about what the situation is. They do not sugarcoat it. They engage with what the reality is, and I appreciate that. So we're going to jump into this. Yeah, the hands-off protest. They've been organizing for a long, long time in lefty spaces, and they've come to prominence here. And understand that when we talk about organizing, the goal is not just like abstract. It is very tangible. We organize for a purpose. You get to know your neighbors. You get them to go out and do things they wouldn't normally do because you need to stand up as a community for what is right. We need to actually start putting our focus on achieving those goals. Because what is frustrating, and I think what a lot of people get disillusioned by, is the fact that organizing is building a foundation. It is building the scaffolding of something greater. It is building up over time. It is not something that generally leads to immediate results. It is not something that generally is super satisfying in the short term. What it can do in the long term is what is the most important. All right? I know that as a community, there have been so many of you who have poured your hearts and your souls into calling your representatives and your senators and faxing them and trying to apply pressure. And understand part of the reason you have been doing that is not just to get better, like to get an immediate result, though of course that is one of the primary goals of doing that. It is also to help you get more used to putting yourself out there. It is also so that you know the ropes so you can help a friend or a neighbor or a family member do the same thing. It is an act that makes it easier for you to do more in the future. Whether that is physically going to a protest, whether that is going to your elected representative's office, whether it is going into town hall meetings, whether it is running for office yourself, it is to flex your muscles when it comes to organizing, because that is very, very important for where we're going. Because the asks are only going to get harder. The asks are going to be bigger than just, hey, can you call someone? Hey, can you fax someone? The asks are going to get bigger as we stare down the barrel of a fascist police state. And so you start with phone calls. You start with talking with your friends. So let's jump into this. What I like also about Indivisible is they provide action points, calls to action for you guys if you just don't really know where to get started. And I think that's very vital and useful.
Hey, folks.
We're going to skip this initial part just because it's a lot of preamble.
Visible groups are made up of individuals, but we find community with each other. We identify where we have leverage, and then we build our power and we push. So I like to start these calls every single week by recognizing some of the dozens of new local indivisible groups that have formed in the previous week, and this week is no different. There were dozens of new indivisible groups all over this week, the world, who have joined. And so let's reflect a little bit on that, and let's give some love to brand spanking new indivisible groups all around the world. I've got OCDWC Indivisible. This is West Virginia Indivisible in Wheeling, West Virginia. If y'all haven't been to Wheeling, it is gorgeous. It is a great.
Dan from the internet, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome, folks. And folks, go check out Dan from the internet. Excellent content creator. Go check him out. Good stuff.
Great place to visit. I recommend it. Welcome, Teddy with Wheeling, West Virginia Indivisible. Julie with Castroville Indivisible. This is in Texas. I didn't even know where it was, and it wasn't so far away from where I grew up. It's just outside of San Antonio, Castroville, Texas, just a town.
Again, one of the things I like about these talks is they talk about the different communities that have been begun to mobilize across the United States, and you get like places in the middle of nowhere, like places, towns of like 2,000 people that are opening up their own indivisible like branch and organizing office. And that is so powerful and so good. And understand, super critical to understand this, folks. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone in your rage. You are not alone in your pain. You are not alone in your sorrow. We all have someone in our lives who we love with all our hearts who is going to be affected by this. And you are not alone in your love. And you are not alone in wanting to take action to do something about this.
Down at 3,000 people. Julie, Castroville Indivisible, welcome to the movement. We've got Christina from Indivisible SOTR. That stands for South of the River in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Lee and I both went to undergrad in Northfield, Minnesota, where the great Paul Wellstone taught. Huge fans of that area in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And with Indivisible Lacrosse, let me correct myself from last week. I said, if you're in a town of 50,000 or more, there's probably already an Indivisible group there. You should just go and find it, because most of the Indivisible groups I've been seeing are brand new in small towns. I was surprised, because Lacrosse has more than 50,000 people and brand new to the Indivisible movement, and has registered Indivisible Lacrosse in Wisconsin. Welcome, Anne, and Indivisible Lacrosse. And then I always like the small towns, because I come from outside city limits in a tiny.
Okay, we'll skip ahead a little bit more.
organizing their own community. This is how you push back against the authoritarians. This is what works, is local organizing. It doesn't mean we win every fight, but it does mean we build the power we need for the long term. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Leah, for all our new people, what do we do these calls for? What's this all about?
Well, welcome, folks. So this is our weekly What's the Plan? We talk about what is in the news. We talk about our strategy. It's mostly Q&A, overwhelmingly live, but we do get some pre-submitted questions in advance from particularly indivisible leaders. If you have a question, you can put it in via the Q&A function under in the toolbar. You can also upvote questions with the little thumbs up sign underneath each question. So upvote the ones that you want to see. We're going to be taking questions mostly from off the top of the queue. So upvote those questions that you want to see us answer. But we'll also try to have some variety and make sure we cover different topics as we can. Time respect. This is a really hard day.
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
a day that is directly has direct personal implications for a lot of people on this call, or a lot of people around the country. Every day has been kind of a really, really hard day for someone since Donald Trump took office. We're all dealing with a lot. Lower D democratic spaces are by their nature messy. We'd really ask you to try to keep this space constructive, respectful, and supportive. We want to lift each other up as we move through these incredibly hard things. That is fundamentally how we are going to organize together. It is fundamentally how we're going to win.
That's right. I saw somebody ask, do I just report out all of the indivisible groups that have joined or just some of them? And what's the process? It is an entire, I do not read out all of it. It's completely random. I look through the list of dozens. I'm like, that's interesting. Where's that? Or oh, there's a group there. If you would like me to call out your group, get in touch with your local indivisible organizer and let them know what you're up to. I would be happy to call out your group out here. Let me know. But let's get in. So we have a lot of questions already coming in. There's been a lot of news. Leah, why don't we cover a bit about the news of the day, and then we'll get into questions. Obviously, the news of the day is this bullshit billionaire bailout bill just passed the House, which means it is headed to Donald Trump's desk for signature. And my understanding is they're planning to sign this tomorrow into law. Before we get into the substance of the bill, I want to acknowledge just how much work everybody on this call, everybody in this movement, all of our partners did to fight back against this and highlight exactly how egregious it is. This meant town halls. This meant empty chair town halls. This meant billboards. This meant highway signs. This meant canvassing. This meant protests. This meant die-ins. I saw Bucks County Indivisible did an incredible event outside of one member of Congress's office just yesterday, an incredible visual showing exactly the impact of this bill, which is to lead to Americans' deaths because of the cuts to healthcare. That is one of the major things this bill does, and you highlighted in this incredible way, and a member of Congress who turned out to be one of two who voted against it, Brian Fitzpatrick. Now, I'm not saying I'm a fan of Brian Fitzpatrick. What I am saying is pressure has worked, pressure did work, and pressure in this moment was not adequate to stop one of the worst bills in American history. That's the reality. That does not mean that it was a waste of time or that it was not impactful to show up. We made this as hard as we possibly could on Republicans. They passed it by the skin of their teeth. That is the reality. That is extremely frustrating to all of us who put our hearts and souls into this fight, and it is the reality. We have to make commitments in this moment to not let this moment pass. They did not just win.
That's a really good point, Lovely Pariah. To get involved in Indivisible, you don't have to be on the street. You can get involved, for example, with graphic design, in a lot of different aspects. You are going to find that your local Indivisible has a lot of needs and a lot of specialized roles that you can fill, even if you are not capable of getting out and being on the front lines of a protest. Okay? Worth pointing out, in every kind of protest movement, there are a lot of different kinds of folks who get involved with a lot of different skills. Some people are better at being on the front lines. Some people are better at running social media. Some people are better at organizing events. Some people are better in a whole host of different ways at various different skill sets. So ask yourself what you are good at and how that could be helpful to a political organizing movement.
Win, and then we all move on. We are not moving on. We are not moving on. And I want to be clear in two ways that we are not moving on. One is the obvious way. One is the obvious way that you're going to hear Democratic politicians talking about right now, which is Elections are in 16 months, and boy, howdy, are these Republicans going to pay for it. That is true, that is real, and that is important to say. It is very important that there is immediate blowback, that this is a teaching moment both for Republicans and the rest of the country, that this is deeply unpopular and that the public will not just sit by and allow it and accept it. We are angry, and there are going to be political consequences. But the election is 16 months away, y'all. It is 16 months away. So just saying we're going to vote in November of 2026 is not adequate.
And by the way, it's really not. What needs to happen is a reckoning. You know, what we need are you guys who are feeling this rage, who are feeling this pain, who are feeling crushed by this. We need some of you to look into yourselves and see whether or not you are capable of running for something, running for office, okay? Because what needs to happen here is not just districts that are up in the air. Maybe they'll go Trump, and maybe they'll go, maybe they went Trump, maybe they all barely went Democrat. You know, like those aren't just the only seats we need to be looking at and earnestly trying to win. There are some Republican strongholds that we need to have people try. You know, the Democratic Party typically doesn't run a challenger in every single Republican district. You know, a lot of elections are not contested. And we need people to contest. We need people to put on their walking shoes and get knocking on doors. In some of these cases, in a town or a city, you and a handful of people might just be able to get you elected over a Republican. And we need to build people. We need to build people up. We need to build this person power movement up now. Okay? Now is the time to be asking yourself, should I run for something? Not 10 months from now. Okay? You need to, like, in the next week, figure out, can you run? And if the answer is yes, do it. That's what we need to do. And if you do it, understand that I will be in your corner. I will help boost you. I will do my best to get this community behind you wherever you are in this country.
Disconnect for me, as I've been following this crap all day. Thank you, Riverboat Jack, for all you do. If you can't find a protest TMW, stay home.
Good night, good night, Chris Huggins. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Get good rest. But we need people to actually be considering this possibility. If you are someone who thinks that, like, you might be capable of doing this, I encourage you to go to www.runforsomething.net. Okay, they will have resources available for you to get you started on the process of running for office. Like, we need people who are able to put out a leftist message, a pro-working class message, and then beat these Republican assholes. What Zoran Mamdani has shown is that we can, in fact, break this Republican conservative machine. And yes, I am well aware that Zoran Mamdani beat Andrew Cuomo, and I stand by what I said. So what we need to do is we need to consider that, because there's no one coming. Okay, there's no intervention that is coming here. China isn't going to come and do regime change here in America. You know, there's not an outside group. There's no secret society. There's nothing. Okay, the courts have effectively abandoned us in a large degree, and we'll talk about that briefly later on in today's stream. But the courts are not going to come to our rescue. That only leaves us. That leaves brute organizing power. That leaves people brave enough to stand up as they look around and realize no one else is doing the thing and doing the thing themselves. And that's the moment we're in. It
is not adequate because some of what's in this bill is not going to just impact us in 2026. It's going to happen now. So let's get into what's in the bill, because we have a responsibility not to just start registering voters and get ready for get out the vote efforts 12 months from now. We have a responsibility to start responding to the new reality that this bill has just created. So if you're on this call, you know it's a bad bill. I'm not going to go through the full list. It's the largest transfer of wealth in American history to the wealthy. It cuts food stamps by more than any time in history. It cuts Medicaid.
Yeah.
I don't fully know how the Dems are going to make them pay with the Jeffries and Schumer playbook. We need enough Mamdanis that they cannot pass anything with, though.
Saki Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. And yeah, no, this is one of the reasons why part of the messaging I think we need to have as leftists is we need to get rid of democratic leadership. The debate going on right now between, the abundance liberals and the progressive wing of the party, that is the battle for whether or not we will see any justice, whether or not we will be able to dig ourselves out of this fascist mess. That is the question here. If we continue to be led by Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, there will be no Medicare for all. There will be no housing reform. There will be no actual, holding to account of these Republicans, of these people trying to kill us. And what needs to happen is radical change, and they are not up to the task.
By more than any time in history. And it creates the single largest federal...
Rachel Atwood, the reason why elements of the online left call Ezra and Leah shitlibs is because there's a certain element of the left that will call anyone who engages in electoral politics shitlibs. If they're on the left in any capacity and involved in electoral politics, you get that label, even if it makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
Law enforcement agency that has ever existed in this country. That's all real. It pays for all of this in 2 ways: by cutting stuff for you, Medicaid, Medicare, other services, and by adding trillions to the national debt. That's all I'll say. If you want a deeper explainer, go talk to the policy wonks. Look at our explainers. You can do that. We're not going to spend more time on the specifics. We can get into it if there are questions. But to be clear, this is not some conservative piece of legislation. That's not what...
Yeah, I mean, like, we're only here in this position in the first place because Chuck Schumer fucked us all and gave up leverage.
I don't see enough passionate anger from the rhetoric on the indivisible calls, and I'm positive that needs to be part of the platform going forward. Civil it dead.
I mean, I do think that the passionate anger is important, but I also think that today is a day for... I think today is a good day for calmly discussing what we're going to do, not out of a place of reaction, but out of a place of consideration. I do understand the desire for a righteous fury, and I feel like I've been channeling a bit of that maybe today, that part of my goal anyway. But I appreciate that there is someone out there who is able to come forward. And honestly, the Democratic apparatus should be the ones coming out there and explaining very clearly what next steps should be for voters. But Democrats are allergic to the idea of ever being like, yeah, this is what we need to do. We need to organize. We need to get more people involved, And so it falls to people like Ezra and Leah.
It is wingnut, reactionary, fascistic stuff. And it is designed to fool the public. It is designed to fool the public because much of the healthcare cuts, much of the actual cuts to things that people enjoy, they don't take effect until after the 2026 midterms. They're going to be invisible, largely, for many people for a long time. The tax cuts for the millionaires and billionaires, those are also going to be invisible to most people. But what's not going to be invisible are the secret police. They are not so secret. What we see now with more than $150 billion going to ICE and CBP and to Trump's deportation force is he is creating his own personal Gestapo. And this isn't any small thing. I want to be clear. If this were a military in the world, it would be funded at the 3rd largest military in the world, behind...
And that is true, by the way. Based on some of the numbers I've seen lately, it would put ICE and CBP and detention, the entire immigration enforcement apparatus would have more funding than the entire military of Russia.
Us and China. It is a Russian military level funding for a federal law enforcement agency that answers to Donald Trump. That is what this bill creates, and not...
And to kind of help you understand what this is, one of the simpler versions of fascism that I've encountered, I think I got it from Matt Chrisman, actually, from the Chapo podcast. But at least that's where I first heard it. I don't know if he coined the phrase, but fascism is colonialism brought inward, and that is effectively what is happening here. Like, we are giving a military budget to an armed and unaccountable force of people to occupy the United States.
In 2026, but now, right now, it is going to go into effect. So this secret police is not so secret. Everybody saw what they did in LA. It dominated national headlines and for good reason. But that was a rehearsal. Why haven't they replicated LA yet? Because they didn't have the money. But now they do. Now they do have the money. So Seattle, New York, Chicago, Austin, they're coming. They are coming. And I don't want to fearmonger, but I do want to set our collective sights on what's coming next so we don't just say, well, they're going to lose in the midterms. That's not enough. We've got to start preparing ourselves and our communities for how to push back against rampant federal overreach in our community.
And honestly, I'm gonna level with you guys. I don't see anyone else in the political landscape right now talking like Ezra and Leah do about organizing and the necessity to organize right now in a national sense. Like they have a national scale ambition and platform, and they are able to inspire local organizing that empowers that nationwide mission and mandate. And like, I think that's really important. I think this type of grassroots oriented while still nationalized concept and I don't know, direction is really, really important. And I think this is going to be the key to getting us out of this mess if we are to get out of it at all.
Communities going forward. So Leah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to talk a little bit about I'm going to take it a step back and just say, the passage of this bill shows us two things. And I think Ezra's covering this, but I just want to restate it. The first is that Trump has pretty much fully consolidated control of the Republicans, right? He has we had the deficit hawks claiming that they were going to put up a fight. They did not put up a fight.
Also, gonna take the opportunity here real quick. If you want to get involved in your local DSA, we can help you do that. This community can help you do that. Use !Discord in the chat. You'll get an invite link to our Discord, and you can message Gamergy on Discord. Gamergy, she will be more than happy to help you get involved in your local DSA or launch a chapter in your area. Okay? You can do both. We have members of this community who have been in the process of launching their own chapters. Okay? Start today. Start organizing today. You can do it. Additionally, if you are interested in getting involved and radicalizing the Democratic Party and effectively, pulling out these useless do-nothing Dems, get involved with your local Democratic Party. You can join the Discord, again, !Discord, and you can message Dragonfly in the Discord, and Dragonfly will help you get involved with your local Democratic Party. And I like in a vast majority of cases, and I shit you not, it's true about DSA, it's true about the Democratic Party. Show up to your monthly meetings, and people in those rooms will just offer you positions of power that you can then use to further a farther left agenda. All you have to do is show up. That is 90% of the work. So get doing that. Okay? We need more people getting involved, and we need more people like hitting the streets, being willing to knock on doors, being willing to phone bank. We need people who go above and beyond just dropping a donation and walking away and then voting. We need more people, because what is arrayed against us is a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of violence. And the only way we stop that is by arraigning our own, our own people.
Right. We had the moderates saying that they weren't going to stand for Medicaid cuts. They ultimately passed massive Medicaid cuts that will take effect in their own districts, with the exception of Lisa Murkowski, who...
Oh, awesome, Horizon. Horizon says, I showed up to 2 meetings of my local progressive org, and they just made me a member of their LGBT issues subcommittee. Congrats. See, like, we need more. You guys should we should figure out a way for you guys to alert me whenever you guys do cool organizing stuff, so I can shout you guys out for your accomplishments, because genuinely, it gives me hope to see you guys doing things. And I think it gives a lot of other people in this community hope too.
Who worked out the very innovative ploy of simply exempting the state of Alaska from as much of this bill as she could, which indicates to you exactly how much of a shit sandwich he knows this bill is. That's one thing. We know that they've consolidated Republicans, and that some of the tools that we've used to try to push on constituent accountability are not getting the results that we need to see. The other thing that we know is that conditions are
also Gamer G, how big is the DSA shimp caucus these days? Just eventually the Riverboat Jack community is going to have enough people in the DSA that we're going to be able to get some real cool shit done.
Going to deteriorate further.
Yeah.
The ICE bill funding, Ezra has covered this. There are other pieces that are happening right now. The Supreme Court ruling sending birthright citizenship back on the justification that there are no longer going to be nationwide injunctions is a pretty big green light to Donald Trump to escalate the lawbreaking, escalate the unconstitutional executive orders, to expect that the Supreme Court will not act to consistently push back and enforce even the most basic parameters of constitutional work. So we are expecting this moment to follow, or we are expecting continued escalation of authoritarian conditions in this moment. And that means for us, a pretty significant shift in our strategy. We've been talking about a lot of this with you so far, but we're really kind of going to go deeper on it right now. And we're going to open a conversation that's going to go through the rest of through the coming weeks. Because what we know is that we are in this period of what the experts call authoritarian breakthrough. It is a time-limited window where a would-be authoritarian is racing to consolidate power before the pro-democracy side gets big and powerful enough to push back before the...
Yeah. Also, I think something that is helpful to understand is that while the current times feel unprecedented, they are not in fact unprecedented. This type of authoritarian pattern has played out in other countries across the world over long periods of time. So we are not in a complete unknown situation, okay? We are in, again, like, there are people who study the rise of authoritarianism, and we are in effect in a core and key time of that rise of authoritarianism. We are now in the make or break period where we need, out of necessity, understand, not, this isn't like, oh, well, maybe I'll pencil some time in. No, out of necessity, you need to make time in your days in order to organize and push back on this current moment. You need to be intentional about getting to know people in your community, joining different groups, going to different meetings. You need to be doing something. Figure out what it is, because it's going to depend on what you're good at, right?
Did Leah just call some goppers moderates? They just seem like bad Republicans at this point, and they should all be lumped together as aiding and abetting.
Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I think the point of this particular moment for Indivisible is still leaving the door open for potential regretful Republicans to be able to come in the door and also join a pro-democracy movement. I don't know how many people are actually going to come in and do that, but like ultimately, if people are willing to side against an authoritarian dictatorship or an authoritarian movement, you know, it took a lot of different types of people to resist Nazi occupation, and they weren't all in ideological lockstep, okay? But I also understand your point.
The backlash against the unpopular stuff they're doing becomes insurmountable. I want to highlight that it is a race. And we know that getting out of that, winning that race, it requires the traditional tools that we've used, like congressional advocacy and elections, but
And yes, Rachel Atwood, totally fair to say you have disagreements with other people in DSA. And my entire premise here is get involved in DSA, get involved in your local Dems, and let's make both of those organizations less shitty and more effective.
It also requires this whole of society strategy that looks at every institution, every source of power in American society and asks, are you complying with that would-be dictator, or are you pushing back? Are you refusing? Are you defying? That means we have to think about how do we collectively use our leverage and push those institutions, whether those are business actors, whether that is the media, whether that's higher education, whether that's our faith communities and more. How do we push them onto the field to fight back for democracy? We need wholesale defiance across our society. That's going to look...
Oh, you started a DSA channel in Discord. Awesome. Cool.
If enough people join DSA, they'll have to make a DSB.
That took me like a split second longer to understand the joke than I would have liked. but I appreciate it. Sake Tanuki. For whatever reason, I thought it was a Dragon Ball Z joke, and then I realized that wasn't it at all. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs.
Look like mobilizations, the ones that we have expertly put on together. It also looks like non-cooperation, which is saying no and refusing to do things people expect you to do. Organizing to protect our communities, strategic campaigns that push on the enablers of authoritarianism from Elon Musk.
Oh, the joke is DSA. The sequel to DSA would be DSB. B comes after A. All right.
To Avelo Airlines ICE deportation flights. We're going to do a deep dive on all of this next week. We might even have slides. I don't know. We're going to walk through the full strategy. Please mark your calendars for that. But I also want to really signpost, this is a moment that requires bringing in way, way more people.
Yep. That is why every subsequent mass organizing event that happens, we should seek to bring in more people. You know, what should be happening here? Okay. There was the hands-off protests that were smaller, but still significant. And then there was the No King's Day protests, which were one of the biggest mass mobilizations of people and protest in modern American history since like the 1960s. And there's going to be another organizing event on July 17th called the Good Trouble Lives On protest. And I think it is important for us to start looking around and start thinking of, hey, I got a group of people to go to the hands-off protest, and I got a slightly bigger group of people to go to the to the No Kings protest. I'm going to get even more people to go to the Good Trouble protest, okay? The goal should be not focusing really on the overall numbers of the protest, but rather how many people you can grow your circle of people you can rely on to go to a protest, okay? That should be your goal. Your goal should be to help mass mobilize by getting as many people out there as we can get at each one of these mass mobilization dates, okay?
Why, after No Kings, we launched 1 Million Rising. The idea is we got a lot of people who've shown up for one event, one protest, one rally. We need to pull those people in. We need them in local relationship with an indivisible group or a local organizing home, and we need to train them on the strategic logic of nonviolent resistance to would-be authoritarianism, because we're going to have to build this out together. We have to develop our campaigns. We have to figure out how we push back together.
Now, I know that there are going to be some people in chat who heard the term nonviolent protest and thought, that man, that's not going to be enough for a current moment, okay? And the reason nonviolent protests are pushed by mainstream groups like Indivisible.
I also wonder how much damage would come from lumping all the GOP reps together. The GOP has been calling Joe Manchin socialist for decades.
That, I think, would be valuable. The Democratic establishment has for too long separated like MAGA from like the general Republican ethos. The old never Trump Republican movement, it's dead. It's dead and gone. It's been dead and gone forever. MAGA is the Republican movement. It is the Republican Party. Like, differentiating them is pointless. And also it kind of always was, really. Like, the values of the MAGA movement are just the values of the Republican movement writ large. You know, doing away with like the idea that like Republican voters ever gave a shit about the deficit, you know? So understand, I agree with you there. But like the reason groups like Indivisible talk about nonviolence is for a couple of different reasons. One, it is a way you can publicly organize to protest. It is a legally protected right of yours to be able to talk about it publicly and organize in that way, right? So it's good to exercise that. Secondly, it is also, again, according to like various research that has been done on combating the rise of authoritarianism, it is statistically the most effective way of defeating an authoritarian movement. It is statistically the most effective way of getting positive outcomes out of defeating an authoritarian movement. Because often, even when there is a violent resistance to an authoritarian government, the results of the violent overthrow of said government might not be as idyllic as one might hope. Now, understand that, of course, historically, nonviolent protest has also you know, around it had elements of violence, right? You had Martin Luther King Jr., you had Malcolm X, you had more radicalized movements, you had the deliberate planning of like the civil rights protests that were nonviolent being done with the knowledge that the brutalization of nonviolent protesters would galvanize the rest of the country into taking action and in ways that might be messy and unpredictable sometimes. And so understand that there has been like when we're talking about protest movements, it's rarely as clear cut as one might think. Understand I've already seen some of you posting in chat things that like, yearn for, fisticuffs. But understand that the focus on nonviolence here is for a number of very, very solid reasons. Okay. And frankly, it's also what I endorse just because, again, the data seems to show that it is more effective. But I also sympathize with those of you who yearn for a faster outcome.
So next week, deep dive in this space, July 16th launch call for 1 million
Yeah, it's for
rising. If you
protection,
are an
exactly.
indivisible group leader or activist who might be willing to host one of those trainings, because this is going to be, we're going to train you, you're going to train your community. If you're getting ready, or if you're able to do that, get ready. This is going to be a crucial part of the push this summer because we got to build towards that 3.5%.
I guess the point is to rally support, not to change politician minds. I mean, in the short term, you want to try and use that support to change politicians' minds. Understand that the goal is to build a mass of people who are dedicated and involved enough that they demonstrate like an existential threat to an authoritarian regime, that they represent an unsustainable, unmanageable threat to the regime's power. This is how, by the way, if I've been reading through Erica Chenoweth's book on nonviolent protests, but this is how countries that have been far more cooked than ours have been able to throw off the yoke of authoritarianism. And it's been done with nonviolent protest in the vast majority of cases. Okay? It is not a game of changing, like you change a fascist's mind and they become less fascist. No, it is a game of building up an insurmountable level of public power and solidarity across society. And that power and solidarity cannot be contained by the military.
We got to build towards the community of people who understand what the time is on the authoritarianism clock and who are figuring out how we collectively use our leverage to push back. We can do it together. It's going to take all of us.
Are there any resources available that help plan town halls or empty chair town halls? I believe your local indivisible groups will have resources to those effects. You can also look at your local Dems organizing or your local DSA. Many of those orgs have already done town halls or empty chair town halls to great effect. So I would look to those orgs as they've been already doing those.
It's going to take all of us. So why don't we talk amongst all of us about what's on your mind and what we can do. We're going to turn to questions. As a reminder, if you put in the chat that you're with an indivisible group in your Q&A, I'll try to find those too because we want to help indivisibles rise to the top. But other than that, we're just going to go through democratically and look at the top most asked questions.
Yep.
So please ask and vote. I will periodically, as an attempt to raise up questions that come in more recently, look at not just the most upvoted, but the ones that have come in recently. I know we've gotten feedback before that if you ask a question halfway through, it never will achieve the top level votes. So we'll do our best. We'll do our best to get to you and answer as much as we can. We've got about 40 minutes for this conversation. So let's get into it. Steven's top question: what are some things we can do during the 4th of July weekend to draw attention to the most toxic aspects of the big ugly bill, as well as the vulnerable congressional Republicans who voted for it? I love this question, Stephen. Leah, initial thoughts on so there are going to be Republicans at 4th of July parades. Right. There are going to be Republicans holding town halls. There are going to be Republicans out grocery shopping. What do you do in this moment?
They tried peaceful protests in Syria and look how that turned out. Well, yeah, again, nonviolence isn't the guarantee of the best outcome in every situation, you know? But understand that the purpose of pursuing nonviolence is to maximize your likelihood of success. That's it. That is fully and completely it. It is not a guarantee that we will win. It is simply the most likely path forward that will give us a good result.
Immediately after they've passed this horrible bill.
Yeah, so the very first thing is if you've got a way to find a Republican in person at their town halls, at their parades, 4th of July is a big visibility weekend. It is a weekend when your elected officials want to be out and about and seen waving an American flag with a big bunch of constituents. Yep. So figuring out what their schedule is and going and asking them the hard questions about why they just cut their constituents Medicaid and getting it on film. Bring a buddy, get it on film. You know what we say, pictures or it did not happen.
Unironically, if you see a sitting member of Congress who's a Republican, you should like follow them around with the camera until they leave whatever 4th of July festivities they're at. Do not give them a moment peace.
These are really important opportunities to hold people accountable in ways that have lasting consequences. That video of somebody flubbing the question about why they voted on
nonviolence can burn you. Tandoors are hot.
Hey, I made more butter chicken today, and it was absolutely decadent and delicious. And again, it's not good. It's not good butter chicken unless you drop a cinnamon, like half a cinnamon stick in there. Okay, you got to get that cinnamon flavor in there, baby. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs, Sake Tanuki. Very much appreciated.
That gets run in the ads 16 months later that explain how somebody gutted Medicaid. So first of all, bird dogging. Second, I know there are
chase them like you're the cameraman on Maury. Oh damn, yeah.
A lot of folks are hosting protests or community events around the country with Free America folks. So there may be a rally in your area immediately during this period. If so, if indivisible groups are hosting those, you know, obviously always a good thing to show up and make your voices heard. I also want to note July 17th, we're throwing in with our partners at Transformative Justice Coalition who are leading the Good Trouble Lives On mobilization. So that is going to be an opportunity around the country to collectively show up. And then finally, I do just want to signpost. It's not public yet, but I got permission to tell folks that there is going to be a day of action towards the end of July, July 26th, focusing on Medicaid, on SNAP, on the services that have been cut, and on the impact that that is going to have on families. A big
marking my calendar right now. I was aware of the one on the 17th. I wasn't aware of the one on the 26th. All right. Medicaid. Okay. Go. And yeah, get in the habit of marking down when these protests are so you can figure out when you can make it to those protests, but also so that you can remember to tell other people when these protests are. Okay? It should be like a reflexive muscle you have when you learn about a new major protest, okay? It needs to become routine. It needs to become part of your like just it's not even a question of whether or not you're going to go. You're going to show up and you're going to bring friends. Shoot bang. By the way, Riverboat Jack, I want to thank you for the repeated calls to action. Thank you. Thanks to you, my fiance and I remember to make it out to No Kings and will likely make it out on the 17th. Hell yeah, shoot bang. Let's go.
Coalition of folks from the Care and Action Coalition to our friends at Move On are all are all collectively pulling that together. So stay tuned for more on that. It should be coming out soon as well.
So just to repeat, upcoming mobilizations are July 17th for the 5-year anniversary of John Lewis's passing. Good Trouble Lives On. Mm-hmm. And then
July 26th, there's going to be a day of action around the country focusing on the services that families depend on that have been put in the line of fire by this bill.
Great. And take advantage if you've got a Republican member that happens to be showing up in public this weekend, show up. If you've got a Democratic member who's showing up in public, give them some support. They fought hard. Look, they fought hard. We have been plenty critical of Democrats who haven't fought hard enough against what the Republicans have been trying to do this year. They did what they could on this reconciliation bill. We pushed at times, and then they listened, and then they took those actions. I do not have a critique of what the Democrats in the Senate or the House did. I think they fought really well. The Republicans own this. They fully own this. And that wasn't a given. At the outset, we weren't positive if that was going to be the case. It is the case. Democrats deserve credit for doing what they could to slow this down and stop it. They just didn't have the votes. Okay, next question from Indivisible Helena. The fascist administration will now exponentially expand the use of information technology to surveil and attack its opponents. ICE will be leading that effort against all of us. While we all need to take measure to protect the privacy and security of our own data and use information technology, what measures are being taken by Indivisibles and vendors, Mobilize, ActBlue, etc., to protect the data about us on these systems?
It's a good
I want to start doing YouTube videos. Is that oversaturated for activism now? I want to do something that can transform into a 24/7 job that makes the world a better place. I figured you of all people would know. Could this help at all? I mean, it could always help, Socialist Senpai. I will say it is hard to like make it, but now like I don't think more people calling for more action is ever a bad thing.
question. It's a good question. The short version is ActBlue actually has issued a bunch of public statements about kind of like its commitment to protecting, the parts of its donors' content that is not public. Obviously, campaign donation information to like electoral campaigns is in fact disclosed over a certain threshold, so that stuff is public already because it's public record. But ActBlue has been really clear that it will not, that it is going to be pushing back against the like wildly partisan and unconstitutional attacks on it, and that it views data security and integrity as part of that. Now, in general, obviously, Indivisible also acts to protect your data. We are not disclosing it. We are making really careful. We intend to push back on any effort. We have not received any attempts to do surveillance of our data, or we have not received any requests for that. But that's absolutely something that we would push back on if we ever got it.
Oh, absolutely. And we implement a lot of data security standards at Indivisible National. We undergo regular tests to make sure that we're not leaking information. We've had security firms go through.
Oh yeah, shoot bang. Like when I talk about we need to have a coherent political movement that demands the dismantling of the current police state, let alone the massive expansion of the police state that is coming in the next year or two. Like it needs to include like holding Palantir and Meta to account, breaking them up with antitrust laws. We need to like dismantle these loci of power
and make sure that we're guarding our data as best as we can. Look, we've been under the microscope for quite some time.
Right.
It is not just coming now, and so we try to be as careful as we can. But the basic question from Indivisible Helena, it comes from the right direction, which is this is going to be 150, 170 billion dollars.
Yep.
The FBI's budget this year, do y'all know what it is? It's just over $10 billion. This is an extraordinary investment in a Gestapo force, and there's no telling what they're going to do with it. There's no telling what they're going to do with it. So we all have to be really careful and take seriously, but we can take some preventative measures. We can be as secure as possible. But ultimately, what I would say is anything you're putting in writing, I would guess that at some point you should feel comfortable that that thing that you put in writing is going to appear in the New York Times or is going to be read by a host on Fox News. I would operate with that level of security going forward.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you are at any level of prominence in organizing or in media, similarly get ready for scrutiny. Make peace with the fact that people may find out information about you you might not want to have public, and also make peace with the idea that, again, any of the things you say may be taken to vilify you and the people you love. It is not an activity that is done without risk, but I think the risk of inaction is far greater.
I agree. I do want to also pull something out on the ICE piece of this, because I think sometimes we talk about a massive amount of funding for ICE and make this automatic connection of like, this is the secret police, this is the would-be Gestapo. And I want to like actually just drill in on the strategic logic of why we're making that jump, right?
Great.
Because I think people might be like, oh, that's immigration enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
There's this phrase that Kika Matos of National Immigration Law Center has used that I think is really important, which is the path to authoritarianism is being paved on the backs of immigrants. Yep. And it's being done in a very specific way, which is the administration is using escalations against immigrants that degrade the rule of law here in this country
Yeah, and I do think that you need to all start preparing yourselves for the fact that this is going to get really, really bad. It is going to be really, really bad, and you need to be that's why we need to start organizing now before these escalations hit. We need to start being active and doing things now before the escalations hit. You need to figure out seriously what you're going to do, how you're going to organize, what your skill sets are. And it is going to be shocking. And the goal of these high profile arrests, and keep in mind the goal of like all of the press coverage of this alligator Auschwitz concentration camp that they've built and are putting people in as we speak. The goal of all of that press is to spread fear so that you are easier to control. So you need to start organizing now with your local community, not just because it is important for us to have like the social structure necessary to weather this storm and help others in our community, but also because one of the most effective ways you can protect people in your community is by building up a grassroots political base in your local area that is capable of advocating for the protection of people in your community. There's a lot that a mayor can do. There's a lot that state representatives can do. There is a necessity in getting involved on the local level here, because one of the final lines of defense is going to be your locally elected officials. And, on the local level, you can get, laws passed to prevent cooperation with ICE. You can get ordinances passed that will make things as difficult as possible for this administration to be the fascists they desire to be. And what we need to do now, and not sugarcoating things this stream, what you need to do now is get involved and gum up the works so that we can play for time. The exact thing we need to do is we need to gum up the works, slow everything down, slow down the rollout of this massive immigration enforcement expansion, slow it all the fuck down as much as we possibly can, so that we can potentially have an off-ramp in 2026. And honestly, I don't know what happens if we don't take that off-ramp in 2026. Nothing good.
As ways to crack open the door to apply those attacks on the rest of us. And in part because they think they're not going to get the kind of pushback they would get if they started with American citizens. So when you're looking at the deployment of the military and the use and the very specious use of emergency powers, like that is a whole host of ways that they have said, oh, we're going to declare.
Jem, Adam Conover released like a pretty comprehensive apology for that ad, which I think there's enough grace in the leftist movement to be able to forgive that. Seemed genuine.
Declare a state of emergency in relation to immigration that justifies us using all of these additional emergency powers. When you're looking at the denial of due process, right? When you're thinking about how they have taken people off of the streets and detained them and tried to deport them or put them in an El Salvadorian torture gulag, that is all done via kind of a denial of due process that they are very clearly going to then escalate to naturalized citizens and to American citizens. When you are thinking about attacks on political opponents, right? The arrests of Ross Baraka, the prosecution of LaMonica Ivor, arrest of Brad Lander, the tackling of Senator Padilla, they are very specifically escalating those things in the context of protests and legitimate and lawful protests around immigration. And again, this is because they have an assessment that they can start to use this as the way to crack down on and chill dissent more broadly. So thinking about the way in which these kind of attacks are being used to build up the security force that is accountable to and reports to Trump, which is ICE. And I will just say, I think anybody who has worked in anything adjacent to immigration in American politics, anybody on the Democratic side who has worked in anything adjacent to immigration and the immigration bureaucracy in American politics is heartily aware that these agencies do not view themselves as accountable to Democrats under the best of circumstances. They simply are like on the verge of open insubordination at most moments. And that is on turbocharged when you have a Republican in office who is signaling that he is going to unleash them. So when we talk about this, we're saying that they have made a strategic choice to focus on immigration in order to degrade conditions for everyone, and that they are empowering their immigration arm right now primarily around immigrants, but they will be using it on everyone. So we've got to see this as a collective fight.
That's right. Somebody asked me to confirm that this is the third largest military force, if it were a military force, in the world. 100, more than $150 billion. That is indeed where it places it. We're talking more than what the Russian military's funding is, right?
Wait, what do you think about Washington, Oregon, and Cali seceding from the Union together? It's not going to happen. It's like a wet dream for a bunch of white nationalists out in Oregon.
Now is going to ICE and CBP and their deportation force. They're not playing around. They're not playing around.
And you do a hiring spree for that right now. Guess who's going to join? It's your white nationalists. It's your Proud Boys. It's all of the people who are like, yes, what I would like is open season on anyone who threatens this administration.
Yep. Okay, moving on to another fun question from Harriet. That's a very reasonable question. What can we do to ensure that Trump doesn't just cancel the midterm elections? And what I would say is that the number one thing that we can do is grow. The number one thing we can do is grow. When we talk to the experts in authoritarianism, people mentioned Erica Chenoweth well, you mentioned Erica Chenoweth earlier, I think, and then we've also seen in the chat earlier. Erica Chenoweth is one of these experts in authoritarianism. If you've heard about this 3.5% figure before, have people heard about that? Let me know in the chat. It's this research that's been done looking at efforts to resist authoritarianism all around the world, and it asks like, how can normal everyday people? Okay, there's a lot of yeses.
Okay, people get it, yeah.
How can normal everyday people push back effectively against it? And I think some people who aren't as attuned to how this works think, oh gosh, you need half of the population to rise up. That's the only way to push back. That's not the case. That's not what the literature shows. Actually, what you need is about 3.5% of the population to actively organize, to not just show up at one march. We had about half of that, a little bit more, show up at No Kings, but not just show up at one march, but actively get engaged in persistent organizing for democracy. That's what works. That's what works. So how do you prevent Trump from...
That is partly why it is incumbent on each and every one of you watching, listening to this, to figure out how you are going to actively contribute and actively get towards organizing efforts in your context. It is desperately important that you figure that out. It's not optional. Are you part of a union? Figure out how to get that union in touch with other unions to organize some semblance of a national workers' strike. Get active in organizing your community, in organizing your workplace, and organizing your family, even.
Just canceling the midterms or in some way infringing on our basic constitutional rights further? The answer is you get 3.5% of the population organized. So when Leah talks about 1 million rising, when we talk about training the trainers, training you to train your community, this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to grow the ranks of peaceful, active, pro-democracy activists all around the country. People who don't currently think.
By the way, Ezra just threw out there an org called, or an initiative called 1 Million Rising. And I'm just throwing this out there here. But this is a set of training seminars that you can attend. They are 1 hour long in the evening from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And it's virtual. Anyone can join. Anyone can sign up. But basically, it is training sessions on what is happening in our current political moment. How do we actually enact change? How do we actually do organizing most effectively? And what are we going to do now? Okay? It's across 3 different days, July 16th, July 30th, and August 13th. If you can make any of those, I'm going to link this event over in all the chats. But if you are someone who's like, I want to do organizing, but also I'm very new and I don't know how to do this right, this is a great resource for you. Okay? This is a great resource for anyone looking to hone their organizing skills, to get out there, to mobilize your local community. That is what we need right now, as many of you as possible, to educate yourselves and figure out your course of action. Okay? So I've linked it in all the chats. Get to it, folks. Very, very important.
think of themselves as leaders, people who don't currently think of themselves as activists, normal everyday Americans. We need them engaged. So the good news is we have a first-time friendly training series coming up, as Leah mentioned, on July 16th. That's when it starts. It's a three-part series. We're setting this up and we want people to come. We want to welcome people into this movement and want to get them ready to recruit more because I don't think there's any neat trick out there that we can use to say, Donald Trump, no, you're not going to do this. The only neat trick we have is each other. That's what we've got. We've got the mass of people who are currently organizing and willing to recruit more people. But that's the only answer I know, Harriet, to how we prevent that.
I will add a couple of additional
Oh,
things.
okay, great. I'll take it.
I'm gonna add a couple of things.
Yeah.
One, part of how we build to that moment is we win the heck out of every election before
Yes,
the
good
midterms.
point. Yep.
Okay, like because part of what we need to do is create the fact pattern in advance of the midterms and the ability to document and expose efforts to sabotage the midterms that will allow us to collectively push back en masse if and when they are attempting to sabotage or steal the results. And so part of that is like blowing them out of the water in Virginia and New Jersey in November, so that there's a really clear demonstration that these policies are wildly unpopular, that there is massive electoral backlash. We need to make Virginia and New Jersey synonymous with kind of like generational level defeats of Republicans that demonstrate that massive electoral consequences are coming, because part of how we're going to get to the outrage that we need if they try to steal it is by being really clear that they know they're heading for a drubbing and that's why they're doing these things.
Also, as we get closer to November, those races are really, really important. And I'll be doing my best to get you guys plugged into effective organizing efforts for phone banking, door knocking, etc. As we get closer to that date. So let's make that happen, folks.
Leah, you're on fire. That's a great answer. Okay, Stacy. Sadly, MAGA politicians are great at playing the victim and blaming Democrats. So when Medicaid gets cut, we all know where they're going to point the finger at Dems. It's a really good point, Stacy. I understand these cuts come after the midterm, no doubt to protect their political assets. But how do we remind those less politically aware that Republicans are responsible for this? Honestly, I feel like we need a giant countdown clock over the White House with a big fat "I did this" sticker plastered on it. Not a bad idea, Stacy. And you are right. One of the ways they achieve these cuts, too, is by pushing it to the states and saying, look, you can fund it if you want. It's not us doing that, but you.
Yeah, Curly Dorothy, always great to shout out the Working Families Party. That they have similar trainings for organizing. I also highly recommend getting involved with the Working Families Party where you're at. That being said, like a lot of orgs have these trainings out there. DSA, Democrats, there are trainings available in many of these orgs. This is simply the most mainstream one that I'm aware of, that I know a lot of people, including like elderly wine moms, are plugged into Indivisible. So this might be an effective way, not just for you to like send the invitation for others to get trained in organizing, like, hey, get your local wine moms in on political organizing training. Okay. Like let's kind of make this a thing and a movement that incorporates as many kinds of people as possible. Shout out to based elderly wine moms. Right?
Democratic governor of New Jersey.
They're the ones calling for heads on pikes right now, like the most. Elderly wine moms just do not give a fuck anymore.
Or you, Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, you should take care of this. I guess the cuts are on you for Medicaid. I guess the cuts are on you for SNAP. So you are exactly right. They are going to act as if this isn't their fault at all.
Yep. Yeah. So I would take it broader. It is Medicaid, it is Medicare. They just revamped the whole damn healthcare system, functionally speaking, because the implications go way beyond any, like you personally as a person on Medicaid. And so what I would say is that in the same way that Republicans blamed literally anything that happened in the healthcare system on the Affordable Care Act for about a decade after it was passed, until the Affordable Care Act became sufficiently popular, they couldn't do that anymore. They just broke the healthcare system. Anything that happens, rising rates, closing hospitals, any like people getting kicked off of Medicaid, people losing access to a physician that they liked, all of that is a product of Republicans sabotaging the healthcare system to give massive tax cuts to billionaires and to fund Trump's secret police. That is the simple story that we are telling collectively in our communities every opportunity we get for the next 16 months and beyond, until we actually get the chance to meaningfully reverse and reform these cuts.
I'm going to bump over to, we got some questions from Indivisible groups ahead of time. One question from Fairfax Indivisible, Karen over there said, what if we put Stephen Miller in the same limelight as we put Musk at the top of the administration, start calling the Miller administration and highlighting his downright evil influence over what's going on? Second line of strategy here is that Trump may very well take this to heart and start a line of infighting between himself and Miller that we could exploit. I think Miller is the top villain in the administration right now. Beyond Trump's secondary figures, I think there's nobody who is as unsympathetic as Miller, and nobody who is driving as egregiously bad policy and vindictive and terrible and vicious policy as Miller is. Leah, what's your thought on focusing specifically in on Miller and highlighting him as one of the drivers of this?
I think it's fine and good where you have the opportunity and the platform to focus on him. What I would say is the difference between Miller and Musk is Musk was himself an outside power center who was
like Leah's totally on point here. Like the power dynamic differential between, Elon Musk and that rat man is like huge. You have on the one hand, you have the world's richest man, and on the other hand, you have like a guy fueled only by hatred. Like, they're not exactly the same insofar as the amount of power they can bring to bear in their own right, And so like Stephen Miller is unabashedly an evil, vile person, but he doesn't in of himself have the same kind of power that Elon Musk does.
Aligned with Trump. And so there was this.
So attacking him is fine, but it doesn't get to the core of the issue in the same way attacking Elon did.
Strategic analysis that we had to fracture that alliance, because Donald Trump is scary enough when he is not powered by the war chest of the richest man in the world. And there was like a specific set of ways in which you could protest Elon Musk as a government employee in your town in a way that made it, accessible. That is not necessarily the case for like a Stephen Miller, who, to the best of my knowledge, does not own a massive commercial enterprise. So I'm totally pro and in favor of highlighting Miller in his role, but I would see him more as like a villain within the Trump story rather than like a power hub that must be addressed specifically separate from the administration.
Okay, next question that's most voted. We got Kim says, when will the changes from the big ugly bill go into effect? Is there anything states can do to protect their citizens from the worst of these cuts? P.S. More grateful than ever for this space and community today as we all group the results. So thank you. I'm very grateful for this space as well. A little bit on the cuts. So most of the Medicaid cuts, though not all of the Medicaid cuts, don't go into effect until after the 2026 midterms. That is how they designed the bill intentionally, because they know how deeply unpopular it is, and they.
Yeah, I mean, like what is happening here, and understand, like, it's not like this bill gets signed and tomorrow, like, Medicaid shuts off for tens of millions of people. It is intentionally slow rolled to mitigate the political effects during the midterms. That being said, it is still going to be very, very bad. It gives us a measure of time here to prepare, to figure out what we can do, how we can respond, how we can properly organize. And that is what we are going to need to do. And part of that organizing is going to need to be going to our state governments, going to our local politicians, and figuring out and demanding of them a course of action that protects us and protects the lives in our communities. We need to be, for lack of a better word, exactly, GamerG, locked in. We need to be locked in because this bill is an existential threat to many of our lives. And we need our cities and our states to hold the line and to fight for our ability to live. That's what needs to happen here. Like on top of like getting more involved in mutual aid, on top of getting more involved in your local city and state politics, we need to figure out a course of action to be there for each other, to mitigate this harm.
hope that people will not take it out on Republicans if the cuts don't go through until after the 2026 elections.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack. Riverboat